Hello, Disney fans. I don't know about you, but I need some holiday magic. I think there's something in the soul that needs that, no matter how you celebrate it, whether you celebrate Christmas or Yule or Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or some other winter holiday that maybe I'm not as familiar with. This time of year is pure magic, and I think the whole world needs what this time of year represents right now. And without that, there's something in us that suffers, that longs for it, even if we don't realize it. That's why I'm going to be doing some holiday themed reviews before I get back to once. And the first one I'm going to do is about a character who had that void, who needed what Christmas represents, Ebenezer Scrooge. So my review is going to be about Mickey's Christmas Carol. This story has been retold so many times since Dickens wrote the original novel. There have been live action movies, there's cartoon adaptations, there's episodes of TV shows that are based on it. It's been retold time and time again, but there's something in it that is so, it embodies the season to such an extent that it doesn't matter how many times it's retold. It just isn't this time of year without knowing some version of it, without hearing that story again. This was my introduction to the story. I always loved it as a kid, and a lot of love went into making it. One of my favorite things about it is the music. I mean, just listen to this and see if it doesn't put you in the holiday spirit. Christmas music is one of the best parts of this time of year. And I say that even working in a store where I hear Christmas music starting at the end of October. So, well, not that quite to that extreme. They wait till the 1st of November, usually. But even hearing Christmas music that much, I love it. And I don't know why this song isn't a part of more Christmas albums, why it hasn't been covered by more artists. It's a great Christmas song. Now, if you were watching the credits during it, you see that Alan Young had a part of the creative process. Alan Young is the voice of Scrooge. So not only did he act in this, he had part in actually adapting the story for this version. This was a real labor of love for him. He also played Scrooge on the album version of this. This was actually told as a story on record before it was ever made into an animated story. And if there's one fault that I have with this, I wish that they would have included some of the music from that record in here. They had some specially written songs for that unfortunately didn't make it to this adaptation. I'm going to include a link to that version in the comments so that you can listen for yourselves, but they really could have made this a full-length Disney feature if they just included a bit of that. But like I said, there was a lot of love that went into this. Another voice actor who had a major part of this and who did it out of love was Clarence Nash, who plays the voice of Donald Duck. Donald is in here as Scrooge's nephew Fred. He came out of retirement for this role, which is pretty impressive. He wanted to do this so bad, and he had had trouble with his voice hurting doing it after all those years. You can imagine that wears on the throat a bit. They didn't quite know if he was up to it, but fun story, he came into the recording studio that first day of recording, and he started talking to everybody in Donald Duck's voice. He even acted like he was angry, like Donald, full on in character, just to have fun with it, and to show that he could still do it. And when you have people who love what they do that much, I really think it makes the final product that much better. The story opens, we see Scrooge walking through London, and you get the usual introductions to how cheap he is. You see somebody begging for alms, and he refuses. We get a story that he actually had his partner Jacob Marley buried at sea and pocketed the money that Marley had left to pay for his tombstone. And we get his associate Bob Cratchit asking for Christmas Day off, which Scrooge agrees to do at a reduced pay. He has to stop a moment to figure out just what exactly he pays Bob.
I pay you 2 shillings a day. Two shillings and a halfpenny, sir. Oh, yes. I gave you that raise 3 years ago.
Did Scrooge manage a Walmart at some point? I'm pretty sure he must have. Of course, even though Scrooge lets Bob have the day off at the reduced pay, he doesn't care for the idea of Christmas himself. He thinks it's just another day that should be worked on. So he isn't exactly thrilled when his nephew shows up to invite him to Christmas dinner.
Humbug. I never care. I said Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Scrooge, of course, thinks Christmas should be just another workday. He isn't going to go to Fred's for dinner, and he isn't going to donate to the 2 people who come asking for money for the poor either. Unfortunately, due to copyright, I can't show the entire clip, but it is the way Scrooge gets out of donating is pretty funny, the logic or lack thereof that he uses. He tells them that he doesn't want to donate to them because if they give the money to the poor wouldn't be poor anymore, and that would put them out of a job collecting for the poor. Of course, it makes no sense, but the way they fall for it and the way Scrooge gets out of donating, it's pretty entertaining to watch. Scrooge isn't going to do anything to celebrate Christmas. After Bob Cratchit goes home, he leaves the office sometime later, and of course, everybody knows the story from there. He goes to open his door, and the doorknob takes the space of Jacob Marley, his former partner. Of course, since Marley's been dead a long time, Scrooge is a bit unnerved about this, and as soon as he goes into his house, the ghost starts to follow him. I love the animation in this sequence. The animation in this whole story is just so beautifully done. They have Marley come through the crack in the wall, and the crack between the door and the wall to get into the place. They have his shadow following Scrooge, and watch this sequence. I think it's pretty neat. I love that it's Marley's shadow, not the way you see Marley as a ghost later, who's following Scrooge. Do ghosts even have shadows? When we see Marley animated later, he doesn't, and it makes sense that a ghost wouldn't have a shadow. There's nothing solid about them. We see him dissolve right through a door. Of course, the ghost doesn't have a body anymore. And yet it adds to that haunting. It builds up to when we see him. That build up adds to the suspense, but yet it's not too creepy where a little kid watching this is going to be afraid. And it's Goofy. How can you be afraid of Goofy? And yet that was one issue I had with it. Even as a kid, I stopped to think, because I stopped to think about who Jacob Marley was, even at a young age. He's someone who was not a good guy in life. He was a miser just as bad as Scrooge. Marty, it's okay. Kitty's over there. She ain't gonna bother you. Yeah, you two get along. Squabbling among siblings. But Marley's not a nice guy. Goofy is. I can't think of any animated short with Goofy where he comes off as somebody who would act the way Marley acts. Hello, Dee. Be nice to your brother, okay? Yeah? Yet, in these scenes where he's Marley, he's not too much Marley and he's not too much Goofy. It's a good balance for a Disney show for what this is supposed to be for kids. I mean, check this out. He's still Goofy, and yet he adds to the menace that Scrooge is supposed to feel.
When I was alive, I robbed the widows and swindled the poor.
Yes, and all in the same day. Oh, you had class, Jacob.
Yup. Hello.
I mean, if I were Scrooge, I'd be a little intimidated by having someone lean in on me like that, especially a ghost. And yet you can still see that they used to be friends, and that would take away from the fear factor with any ghost, I would think, if you knew that ghost in life. And you can hear almost the start of a friendly conversation, and Marley doesn't regret what he did quite fully yet. There's that little moment where he's proud of how he used to be, and then he's like, oh, wait, no, I was wrong. And he gives Scrooge the warning that he needs, of course. He warns him about why he's carrying those chains, that it's punishment for the way he was in life.
Thing will happen to you, Ebenezer Scrooge.
No, it can't. It mustn't. Help me, Jacob.
In that moment especially, we see Goofy can be effective as Marley. He warns Scrooge, in the way I'm sure you all know, that he's going to be visited by 3 spirits that night. The ghost of Christmas past, present, and future. Well, after Marley leaves, Scrooge isn't quite sure he believes yet. He goes to bed, and that's when the first spirit comes. Now, I know it's not actual camera work, but the way it's done looks like a camera following this character, who's played by Jiminy Cricket, as he jumps into the room. And that's a really neat detail, showing it from his viewpoint, from Jiminy Cricket's viewpoint, the Ghost of Christmas Past viewpoint. Again, I love the animation in here. There's scenes when you see them out in the snow, and you can follow each individual snowflake as it falls to the ground. Now, I've seen other animated snowstorms where the snowflakes each just kind of dissolve midair and then others take their place. But here, keep in mind, somebody actually took the time to hand draw each flake. They drew each expression on the characters' faces. They considered the lighting effects. They considered everything when they animated this. And I respect the work that computer animators do greatly. But to me, nothing can equal the hand-drawn animation. It's an art form that's sadly being lost, and there's just something to it that has a special magic in it that takes you right back to your childhood as soon as you see it. There's something wonderful in that can't be replaced. Now, like I said, watch this scene where the Ghost of Christmas Past enters the room. Maybe I am just easily impressed, but I really respect all the consideration that went into drawing this. There's just as much thought, if not maybe more, that goes into drawing all this out than there is for a live action film. If something's live action, you can have different cameras at different angles, and then they edit together what they thinks are the right shots for that scene. In animation, you got to consider all of that before you draw it. You're the one drawing what you want the scene to look like. There's nobody going to come in and combine different shots off the camera. So I take this as one of the signs of the real effort that was put into making this. Now, of course, the job of the Ghost of Christmas Past is to remind Scrooge that he was not always the way he is now.
Kindness is of little use in this world.
You didn't always think so.
Another job of the Ghost of Christmas Past is to remind Scrooge of just what he lost by becoming a miser, by changing who he used to be. And the biggest thing he lost is his love, Isabel. And we see this beautiful moment where they're together at a dance, and Scrooge is being shy, and Isabel clearly loves him, and she takes advantage of being under the mistletoe with him.
Oh.
10 years later, Isabel's still waiting on him to keep his promise to marry her. She comes and brings up the subject by reminding him that she's got the honeymoon cottage, and she wants to know if he's made his decision. And he breaks up with her in the cruelest way possible.
Last payment on the cottage was an hour late. I'm foreclosing the mortgage.
Seeing all of this all over again from the perspective of an outsider this time, watching his own life, Scrooge, of course, feels horrible about what happened. All that memory is fresh, but he's seeing it from a different viewpoint. He has nobody to blame for it except himself, which the Ghost of Christmas Past reminds him of. He doesn't have long to think on that, though, before the Ghost of Christmas Present arrives. Now, in most versions of A Christmas Carol, the Ghost of Christmas Present is portrayed as a very large, giant figure. And in this version, he's played by Willie the Giant, who is the giant that's drawn in the Mickey Mouse Jack and the Beanstalk story. If you haven't seen that one, it's on Disney Plus. Pretty good version of the story, so maybe worth looking into if you're curious about where Willie the Giant comes from. The room is filled with all kinds of wonderful things to eat, and here's an interesting thing that it matches up with the line Scrooge says in the book in a contradiction, but they don't have it in this version, which I can understand because it would make Scrooge seem just too unsympathetic for a kid show. When the two people come to collect money for the poor, in the original novel and in most versions, Scrooge asks, well, can't the poor go to prisons and workhouses? And they respond, a lot of them can't go there and some would rather die. And Scrooge just heartlessly says, well, if they'd rather die, they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. He's got the viewpoint there isn't enough for everybody, even as he hoards all the wealth. Like far too many rich people still do, instead of having charity in their hearts. All a banquet laid out by the Ghost of Christmas Present is what he calls the food of generosity. The Ghost explains it's what he has withheld from his fellow man. Two conflicting theories. Scrooge thinks that there isn't enough for everybody, let's let those who don't have enough die off, so there's more for the rest of us, where the Ghost is saying, you're wrong, there's enough for everybody. He's taken to see somebody who doesn't have enough because of what he withheld. He sees how Bob Cratchit celebrates his Christmas.
What's she cooking, the canary? Surely they have more food than that.
Even with them having so extremely little, you can tell they're infinitely happier than Scrooge's. They're together, they're a family, they love each other, they're happy that Christmas is here. It's still a day to celebrate even with what little they have. And the one who's probably the most grateful for all they have is Tiny Tim.
Oh my, look at all the wonderful things to eat. We must thank Mr. Scrooge.
That line always impressed me. With how little they have, Tiny Tim is still thinking of Scrooge saying, yeah, we gotta be thankful to him. When he gave them so little that they can't even buy enough for a decent meal, Tim is actually thankful to him. And Scrooge realizes this too. And he also sees how sick Tiny Tim is.
What's wrong with that kind lad?
Much, I'm afraid. If these shadows remain unchanged, I see an empty chair where Tiny Tim once sat.
Miser though he is, Scrooge isn't completely heartless. And he is clearly concerned what will happen to Tim. He even asked the ghost, does that mean Tim will... And it seems like he's so horrified at the thought that he can't even finish the sentence to ask if Tim is going to die. The Ghost of Christmas Future shows up then, and he asks what's going to happen to Tim. And of course, he's not going to like the answer to that.
Oh no!
I know he's in the role of Bob Cratchit, but you still can't help seeing Mickey Mouse in your mind, and Mickey Mouse is not supposed to look that broken. How can anyone see that and not feel the sheer grief that he's lost his child. And they convey it without even any dialogue on his part, just the look, just the way the single tear going down his face, him standing there and laying the crutch on the grave. You know, this is surprisingly an adult way to portray it. Kids are going to get this, sure, but it's very deep. It's much darker than you would typically see in an animated feature. Well, at least an animated feature back then. Now they have a lot more darker things in kids shows. But this was pretty disturbing for kids, and I'm glad they did it that way. They didn't sugarcoat what happened, because you're not supposed to do that with A Christmas Carol. You're supposed to get that what Scrooge has done is going to have severe consequences. The way he lived his life has hurt a lot of people. They're suffering because he's such a miser. That's the whole thing Scrooge has to learn, is he has to wake up and see what he has caused. He's not the kind of person that wants a kid to die. He does care. He actually does have a heart. And he's waking up to the fact that he'd better use it. There's going to be consequences for Scrooge as well, as he's about to find out when he looks over and sees two grave diggers working on a grave with nobody there to care about the person that died.
No mourners, no friends to bid him farewell. Oh, well, rest a minute. A boy flew it in, eh? He ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, you decided to join me for this, Dee Dee? Kitty? Yeah. Now, in most versions, there's more leading up to the reveal that this is Scrooge's grave. You don't really get that in this one. They cut out a fair few things for the sake of time, and I'm sure to make it simpler for kids who want to watch it. But this scene is definitely not kid-friendly, and I give Disney credit, like I said, for not sugarcoating it. But when I was little, this scene used to terrify me because it's the closest you see in anything Disney, except for, I would say, maybe Night at Bald Mountain, of somebody connected to hell. It looks like he's being taken by the devil himself. Just check out how terrifying this scene would be to a kid.
Whose lonely grave is this? Why, yours, Ebenezer.
The reveal that it's Scrooge's own grave is scary enough, but now, in most versions, you aren't really sure, or Scrooge at least isn't really sure, if he's only being shown things that will be or might be. Is he already dead? In the Alastair Sims version, for example, which is probably my favorite, I would say these are pretty close to my favorite versions of the story between the two of them. In the Alastair Sims version, she drops to his knees and begs the spirit of Christmas future to tell him that he's not already dead. He's not sure, has he been taken to the future really? Is he only being shown this? This takes this a step beyond that, and it shows the ghost of Christmas future actually shove Scrooge into the grave. The coffin opens up with fire coming out, and it's just chilling to watch. Of course, they don't really send Scrooge to hell. They're not going to get away with that in a cartoon. Animated feature, I should say, is more correct than cartoon. It's not really a cartoonish thing. It's a beautiful animated picture. But they're not going to send Scrooge to hell in something intended for children, at least not permanently. Of course, that would also ruin his redemption if the ghosts are visiting him to get him to change. If he's going to hell anyway, then what's the point? Scrooge wakes up, of course, on Christmas morning and realizes he's been given a second chance.
I'm back in my own room. It's Christmas morning.
Nice detail in that you can see the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral when he looks out the window, setting that this is taking place in London, like the original story. There are so many beautiful details in here, both in how they set things up and in the animation, and I really wish I could do better than recording them off the TV and including the clips, but you can see just how much thought they put into designing everything, and I really hope that you guys check it out on Disney Plus and see it the way it's supposed to be. It's really beautifully drawn, better than I could ever show by recording it this way. Now, one of the details that they include, that they thought out, is how Scrooge moves, which is something that doesn't go into a lot of cartoons these days. Cartoon characters all tend to move the same. Here in the beginning, you see Scrooge moving bent over. He's stiff. He's an old guy who doesn't care about it. Even his movements show how grouchy he is, how cold, how seemingly uncaring. You don't see that he does have a heart that has to be brought out yet. He seems like somebody who give up on him. There's no hope in this guy. It's beautifully conveyed through the way he walks stooped over and the stiffness of his movement. Now, when he has the joy of the season, not only does he stand upright, not needing his cane except for mostly for show, but he also has the energy to slide down the banister like a little kid. He's loving the second chance he's been getting. He's so filled with the joy of it that it seems to make him physically younger. And that is beautifully thought out in this. And when he slides down that banister, he runs into the same two money collectors from before, and he makes sure to treat them differently this time.
Well, bless me. Good morning, gentlemen. I've something for you.
Again, for copyright reasons, I have to keep the clip short, but it is so funny, the interaction in this scene. The way before he tricked them out of accepting donations from him, this time he actually keeps giving them more. Here you go, here's your whole bag. Oh, really? This is, oh, not enough? Okay, here's more. And that goes on for a little bit, and it's just so joyful to watch, and you get to see so much joy in how Scrooge is feeling giving that money to them. He really feels what Christmas should be. He's enjoying the experience of giving. He also has a little fun with Bob Cratchit pretending to be the way he used to be. And Tiny Tim isn't fooled for a second as soon as he sees the toys in the bag.
Won't you come in? Merry Christmas. Huh. I have another bundle for you.
It's fun to see how Scrooge is trying so hard to hide it, and Tim keeps looking in the bag and finding all the wonders that Scrooge brought for them. And of course, Scrooge gives up the joke and tells Bob that he's going to give him a huge raise, make him his partner, and that he's going to help him out with what he needs financially. And of course, it wouldn't be the Christmas Carol without Tiny Tim's most favorite line.
Christmas, Bob.
And God blesses everyone.
The expressions that they have on their faces that show, they're clearly family now. The book describes Scrooge as becoming a second father to Tiny Tim. And you can see how Tim accepts him right away, wrapping his arms around his neck, and how happy Scrooge is to receive that. He realized, especially I think from the past, what he had lost by being who he is, and now he's regained that. And the ending scene, the last few seconds, are especially sweet. The way he puts his hat on Tim's head and the way he pulls the kids up into his lap in the rocking chair, it's like he's a beloved grandfather to them. And you could just feel the heartwarming, and it brings happy tears to the eyes to watch it. Maybe I'm getting a little over sentimental here, but I always loved the way it turned out with him, a member of their family, and he realizes what he's lost, and that's the key, is he wants to be a part of this. He wants to be part of the family, or he wants to help them. That's one thing that I kind of debated about at first, was the scene where it shows him almost going to hell. Did he change more out of fear, or did he really want to change? And the way it ends makes it clear he really wanted to change. He found the change in his heart to make it genuine. They could have expanded on it here a little bit with no, maybe not. I think on second thought that would have ruined it. The book describes how the change was permanent, but you don't need to have that spelled out for you, really. You can see and hear that he's a member of the family now, and that he will continue to help them. He will continue to be generous. The change in him is going to last for the remainder of his life. And I hope that the world gets more people like he becomes at the end. We need generosity, especially in these times. There's always going to be people in need, and there's always going to be people who have more than they could use in 100 lifetimes. But I hope those people start to become more generous, and I hope things change where that more people at the top see that the people at the bottom need them, that they learn the lessons Scrooge learned. I hope you enjoyed this in spite of the bad clip recordings. I hope you feel the spirit of the season, whether you're celebrating Christmas, Yule, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you're celebrating, whether you say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whether you say Feliz Navidad or Merry Kalikimaka. I hope you really enjoy this season, and I'll be getting another holiday episode in soon before the end of December, and all stay safe and remember the magic.